What starts people down the failure freeway is a common mistake, failure, or mess-up. But people who stay on the failure freeway don't think that it's their fault. They see every obstacle or error as somebody else's fault, and as a result, they generally respond in one or more of the following ways. Number one, they blow up. One of the reactions to failure that keeps people driving on the failure freeway is anger. You've probably seen it. People make a minor mistake and angrily overreact to it, taking out their frustration on themselves or others around them. But if a person doesn't govern his temper, it will govern him. Number two, they cover up. People's desire to make sure others don't see their mistakes isn't always so humorous. For example, take the case of Nicholas Leeson. In 1995, the 28-year-old worked for the British bank Barings. He controlled huge amounts of money for the organization, which he tried to increase through what's called casino-style investing. When Leeson's dealings resulted in huge losses, he covered them up and made even riskier trades to try to recoup his losses. Ultimately, his actions cost Barings $1.3 billion. He single-handedly put one of the oldest banks in the world out of business. It's in the nature of people to try to cover up their mistakes. That tendency is as old as Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. But anyone who wants to get off the failure freeway needs to fess up rather than cover up. Number three, they speed up. People who are particularly stubborn will sometimes try to leave their troubles behind by working harder and faster, but without changing their direction. They're like the person trying to get the square peg into the round hole, who first tries to place the peg into the hole and then tries to shove it in, then takes a hammer and tries to pound it in. They're working hard, but getting nowhere. Number four, they back up. When my wife Margaret and I were raising our two children, we found that our son had a mind and a will of his own. And when he did something wrong, his first move was to lie. Then he'd back up and try to cover it up. I can still picture his offended expression as he emphatically denied having eaten the chocolate candy, with his 9-year-old face smeared with chocolate. Margaret and I worked very hard to break him of that inclination. I'm relieved that today my boy Joel is a man, and when he's wrong he admits it. And that's good, because nobody can exit off the failure freeway if he keeps backing up. Number five, they give up. If you stay on the failure freeway long enough, you eventually slow up. It's similar to what happens on the Interstate 285 loop around my hometown of Atlanta at rush hour gridlock. And that's when a lot of people simply give up. Personal growth expert Paul J. Meyer believes that 90% of all those who fail are not actually defeated, they simply quit. There's really only one solution to the gridlock you find on the failure freeway, and that's to wake up and find the exit. To leave the road of continual failure, a person must first utter the three most difficult words to say: I was wrong. He has to open his eyes, admit his mistakes, and accept complete responsibility for his current wrong actions and attitudes. Every failure you experience is a fork in the road. It's an opportunity to take the right action, learn from your mistakes, and begin again. The only way to exit the failure freeway and see the new territory of achievement is to take full responsibility for yourself and your mistakes. As Michael Korda, editor-in-chief of Simon & Schuster, says, success on any major scale requires you to accept responsibility. In the final analysis, the one quality that all successful people have is the ability to take on responsibility. The fight to take responsibility occurs within, and rarely does talent, intelligence, or opportunity make the difference in whether a person wins that battle. What it takes is character. That's why Stuart B. Johnson said that our business in life is not to get ahead of others, but to get ahead of ourselves. But unfortunately, not everyone learns the lesson of accepting responsibility for their actions. One of the most unusual stories I've ever encountered about someone on the failure freeway is that of Rosie Ruiz. Back in 1980, she was the first woman to cross the finish line of the Boston Marathon with the third fastest woman's time ever. But from the moment that she finished the race, people were suspicious of her victory. The person most shocked was Jacqueline Garrow, Though not favored to win the race, Garrow had been training to run it for 3 years, and during the course of the race she had pulled ahead of all the other women. But about a mile from the finish line, another woman suddenly appeared, running ahead of her, and that other woman, Ruiz, finished before her and was declared the woman's winner. The race officials were suspicious, and they immediately began to investigate. They found that Ruiz had qualified for the Boston Marathon by obtaining a fraudulent qualifying finish for the New York Marathon. They surmised that in the Boston race, Ruiz had simply jumped into a group of runners a mile from the finish line, never suspecting that she was actually ahead of all the other women. The Boston Athletic Association disqualified her, and a week later they awarded Garrow the winner's medal. What's most amazing that is even years later, Ruiz still hadn't learned from her mistake. At a 10-kilometer race in Miami, Garrow saw Ruiz and tried to talk to her to clear the air, but Ruiz denied ever cheating in Boston. 2 years after her appearance in the Boston Marathon, Ruiz was arrested and charged with stealing cash and checks from her employer. A year later, she was convicted for trying to sell 2 kilos of cocaine to an undercover police officer. As Sir Josiah Stamp said, "It is easy to dodge our responsibilities, but we cannot dodge the consequences." I don't know what Rosie Ruiz is doing today. Back then, Ruiz was doing a lot of moving, but she wasn't getting anywhere. Let's hope that she finally found the exit off of the failure freeway. Step number 5 to failing forward: change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. Let's take a moment and review the first 5 steps of failing forward, because it's my desire to teach you when you fail to fail forward instead of backwards. Step number 1, realize that there is one major difference between average people and achieving people. Step number 2, learn a new definition of failure. Step number 3, remove the you from failure. Step number 4, take action and reduce your fear. And step number 5, change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. Chapter 6, no matter what happens to you, failure is an inside job. When you learn to accept responsibility for yourself, your problems, and your failures, you are better prepared to fail forward. But what about when you're faced with overwhelming difficulties that you didn't create and you cannot control? At no time in life are people more prone to allow failure to make them give up than when external circumstances cause extreme hardship or grief. But ultimately, no matter whether the difficulty is self-created or comes from somewhere outside of you, failure is created within the person. It is always an inside job. Many people desire to control the circumstances of their lives, but the truth is that we cannot determine what will come our way. We can't control the hands we're dealt, only how we play the cards. South African General Jan Christian Smuts said, "A man is not defeated by his opponents, but by himself." That's true. No matter how daunting the circumstances of your life may be, the greatest battle you wage against failure occurs on the inside, not the outside. How do you fight that battle? You start by cultivating the right attitude. You're probably familiar with Murphy's Law, which says, if anything bad can happen, it will, and at the worst possible time. And then there's the Peter Principle, which says people always rise to the level of their incompetence. There's another saying similar to those called the Law of Human Behavior. It says, sooner or later, we get just what we expect. I have a question to ask you. Is the law of human behavior optimistic or pessimistic? Stop and think about your answer. I say that because your response reveals your attitude. If you expect the worst out of life, then you probably said the law was written by a pessimist. If you have a positive outlook, then you probably answered optimist, because the prospect of getting what you expect is very encouraging to you. Your attitude determines your outlook. The first element in winning the internal battle against failure is to maintain a positive outlook. University of Pennsylvania psychology professor Martin Seligman, who has studied employees in 30 different industries, observes that people who bounce back are optimists. Let's face it, not everyone is naturally optimistic. Some people are born seeing the glass half empty rather than half full. But no matter what your natural bent is, you can become a more optimistic person. How do you cultivate optimism? By learning the secret of contentment. If you can learn that, then no matter what happens to you, you can weather the storm and build on the good that you find in any situation. There are a lot of misconceptions about contentment. Let's talk about what it's not. Number one, it's not containing your emotions. We all experience negative emotions, and while you don't want to let your emotions run amok, you shouldn't try to stuff them either. Denial doesn't help you become content. In fact, your emotions will come out eventually, even if you try to bury them. Number two, it's not maintaining your current situation. My dad, who was a pastor for many years, used to tell the story about a farmer in one of his churches who refused to improve himself. Dad would try to encourage and cajole him, but he said the old man just wouldn't change. His response to my father was always the same. I'm not making much progress, but I'm well established. One day my father was driving past that man's farm, and he saw that the old farmer's tractor was stuck in the mud. No matter what the man did, mud just flew and the tractor stayed put. After the old farmer gave it one more try and was no better off than he had been before, he started cussing up a storm. At that point, my dad rolled down his window and hollered out to the man, "Well, you're not making much progress, but you certainly are well established." Being content doesn't mean being satisfied with a bad situation. It simply means having a good attitude as you work your way out of it. Number three, it's not attaining position, power, or possessions. In our culture, too many people believe that contentment comes from attaining material possessions or positions of power. But they aren't the keys of contentment either. If you are tempted to believe that they are, remember the words of John D. Rockefeller. When a journalist asked him how much wealth was enough, the millionaire, who was at that time one of the richest and most powerful men in the world, answered, "Just a little more." True contentment comes from having a positive attitude. It means expecting the best in everything, not the worst, remaining upbeat even when you get beat up, seeing solutions in every problem, not problems in every solution, believing in yourself even when others don't, and holding on to hope even when others say it's hopeless. No matter what happens to you, a positive attitude comes from within. Your circumstances and your contentment are unrelated. Failure is an inside job, and so is success. If you want to achieve, you have to win the war in your own thinking first. You can't let failure outside of you get inside of you. You certainly can't control the length of your life, but you can control its width and depth. You can't control the contour of your face, but you can control its expression. You can't control the weather, but you can control the atmosphere of your mind. Why worry about things you can't control when you can keep yourself busy controlling the things that depend on you? Right now you may be saying, "That's all well and good for you, John. You haven't experienced what I have." If you still have a hard time believing that failure is really an inside job, then you need to hear the story of someone who maintained a winner's attitude while overcoming the most difficult of circumstances. His name is Roger Crawford. He makes his living as a consultant and public speaker. He's written 2 books. He travels all across the country, working with Fortune 500 companies, national and state associations, and school districts. Those aren't bad credentials. But if that doesn't impress you, how about this? Before becoming a consultant, he was a professional tennis player certified by the United States Professional Tennis Association. Still not impressed? Would you change your opinion if I told you that Roger had no hands and only 1 foot? Roger Crawford was born with a condition called ectrodactylism. When he emerged from his mother's womb, the doctor saw that he had a thumb-like projection extending out of his right forearm and a thumb and a finger growing out of his left forearm. He had no palms. His legs and arms were shortened, and his left leg possessed a shrunken foot with only 3 toes. His foot was amputated when he was 5. Roger's parents were told by various medical professionals that he would never be able to walk, probably would not be able to take care of himself, and would never lead a normal life. But Roger's parents were determined to give him the best chance possible for living a normal life. They raised him to feel loved, to be strong, and to develop independence. "You're only as handicapped as you want to be," his father used to tell him. Roger appreciated the encouragement and training that he received from his parents, but I don't think he really understood the significance of it or his achievements until he was in college and he interacted with someone who wanted to meet him. He had received a phone call from a man who had read about his tennis victories, and Crawford agreed to meet him at a nearby restaurant. When Roger stood up to shake hands with the man, he discovered that the other guy had hands that were almost identical to his. That got Crawford excited, because he thought he had found someone similar to him, but older, who could act as his mentor. But after talking with the stranger for a few minutes, he realized that he was wrong. Roger says, "Instead, what I found was someone with a bitter, pessimistic attitude who blamed all of life's disappointments and failures on his anatomy. I soon recognized that our lives and attitudes couldn't have been more different. His attitude was, the world owes me, and his problem was that the world disagreed. He was even angry with me because I didn't share his despair." The two kept in touch for several years until it dawned on Roger that even if some miracle were suddenly to give the other man a perfect body, his unhappiness and lack of success wouldn't change. He would still be at the same place in his life. That man had allowed failure to seize him from the inside, while Roger had mastered the art of failing forward. Chances are that the adversity in your life has been nowhere near as difficult as Roger Crawford's has been, and that's why his story is such an inspiration. Roger maintains that handicaps can only disable us if we let them. He says that's true not only of physical challenges, but of emotional and intellectual ones as well. He believes that the real and lasting limitations are created in our minds, not our bodies. In other words, no matter what happens, failure is an inside job. Step number 6 to failing forward. Don't let failure from outside get inside of you. Chapter 7. Is the past holding your life hostage? When I get a bit of time off, one of the things I like to do is play golf. Now, I'm not a great golfer. I'd say I'm average, but no matter what, I'm glad to get started golfing. And I can tell you who it was that got me interested in the sport. Arnold Palmer. Many people of my generation became golfers because of Arnold Palmer. His down-to-earth attitude, sparkling personality, rugged good looks, and incredible playing ability caused him to draw huge crowds of spectators who would follow him from hole to hole. Back then they were dubbed Arnie's Army, and it seemed they'd follow him anywhere to get a chance to see the man they called the King perform on the course. It was a first for golf, and it was sure fun to watch. One of the things about golf is that anyone can have a really bad hole, even a Hall of Famer like Arnold Palmer. The key to playing through it is to forget about your bad shots. But that can be a difficult thing to do, especially when someone erects a bronze monument to your bad hole. And that's what happened to Arnold Palmer. At the 1961 Los Angeles Open, on a par 5 ninth hole, Palmer hit a good drive and wanted to try to put the ball on the green with his second shot. With his 3-wood, Palmer hit what he believed was a good shot, but as the ball sailed, it faded to the right, hit a pole, and bounced out of bounds onto the driving range. Palmer dropped the ball, took a penalty stroke, and tried again. He had another ball out of bounds. Again he dropped the ball and took a penalty stroke. He kept repeating this process until he finally put the ball on the green. By then he had accumulated 10 strokes. It took him 2 more strokes with his putter to hold the ball. He finished with a 12. And because of that, he went from a few strokes behind the leaders to scoring so poorly that he was out of the tournament. Today, nearly 40 years later, if you go to the 9th hole at the Rancho Park Golf Course in Los Angeles, you will find a bronze plaque that states, "On Friday, January 6, 1961, the first day of the 35th Los Angeles Open, Arnold Palmer, voted Golfer of the Year and Pro Athlete of the Year, took a 12 on this hole." However, good golfers don't dwell on bad performances, not if they want to remain good golfers. And that has always been true of Arnold Palmer. Once when asked about his performance at the Open on hole 9, he commented, "That doggone plaque will be there long after I'm gone." But you have to put things like that behind you. That's one of the wonderful things about golf. Your next shot can be as good or bad as the last one, but you'll always get another chance. The same quality that makes professional golfers effective enables any person to overcome failure and become a strong achiever. The ability to put past events behind them and move on. That quality positions a person to tackle current challenges with enthusiasm and a minimum of hindering personal baggage. In contrast, people who are unable to get over previous hurts and failures are held hostage by their past. The baggage they carry around makes it very difficult for them to move forward. It may sound like I'm making light of what happened to you in the past. I'm not. I know that people suffer genuine tragedies in this imperfect world. They lose children, spouses, parents, and friends, sometimes under horrible circumstances. People contract cancer, multiple sclerosis, AIDS, and other debilitating diseases. They suffer unspeakable abuses at the hands of others. All of those things are true. But tragedies don't have to stop a person from possessing a positive outlook, being productive, and living life to the fullest. One man is born with severe handicaps and decides the world owes him, while another, such as Roger Crawford, goes on to become a tennis pro. One person who contracts AIDS bitterly gives up on life, while another, such as basketball's Magic Johnson, builds his business and enjoys his family life. One woman experiences rape and withdrawals into herself, while another, such as Kelly McGillis, overcomes the experience and becomes a successful actress in Hollywood. No matter how dark a person's past is, it need not color his or her present permanently. In my experience, the problems of people's past impact them in one of two ways. They experience either a breakdown or a breakthrough. Listen to the following 5 characteristics. They are signs that a person hasn't gotten over past difficulties. Number 1, comparison. If you hear people continually talk about how much harder they've had it than anyone else, chances are they are allowing themselves to be held hostage by their past. Their motto is similar to something Quentin Crisp once said: "Never keep up with the Joneses. Drag them down to your level. It's cheaper." Number 2, rationalization. Another characteristic of people trapped by their past is believing that there are good reasons not to get over past difficulties. The problem is that rationalizing creates a fog that hinders people from finding solutions to their problems. Excuses, no matter how strong, never lead to achievement. Number 3, isolation. Some people withdraw due to their past hurts. For many, it's like a natural reflex that kicks in for self-protection. It is especially sad when people who are naturally outgoing isolate themselves due to their past, because they become especially miserable. Number 4, regret. One of the greatest hindrances to living life in the present is regret. It saps a person's energy and leaves little that enables him or her to do anything positive. Number 5, bitterness. Anyone who doesn't get past the problem or the pain of the past eventually becomes bitter. It is the inevitable consequence of not processing through old injuries and tragedies. But no matter what you've experienced, remember this: there are people who had it better than you, but who have done worse. And there are people who have had it worse than you, but who've done better. The circumstances really have nothing to do with getting over your personal history. Past hurts can make you bitter or better. The choice is yours. Every major difficulty you face in life is a fork in the road. You choose which track you will head down, toward breakdown or breakthrough. It is a turning point, but you determine which way you will turn. If you've been badly hurt, then start by acknowledging the pain and grieving any loss that you may have experienced. Then forgive the people involved, including yourself if needed. That will help you move on. I understand that it may be very difficult to go through this process, but you can do it. Just think, today may be your day to turn the hurts of your past into a breakthrough for the future. Don't allow anything from your personal history to keep holding you hostage. Step number 7 to failing forward. Say goodbye to yesterday. Chapter 8. Who is this person who keeps making these mistakes? Sometimes great achievement can come only as the result of a period of failure that helps you understand who you really are. That was the case of John James Audubon, the man for whom the National Audubon Society was named. His life was one of great extremes, problems and progress, struggle and success, failure and fanfare. Listen to his story. The son of a French sea captain, Audubon was born in Haiti in 1785, but spent his formative years in France. He was educated as a gentleman, but was at best an indifferent student. His real passion was hunting and drawing birds. At 18, Audubon was sent to America, where he moved into a house his father owned in Pennsylvania. There he honed his skills as a woodsman. He continued hunting and drawing wildlife, and it wasn't long before he met and developed a relationship with a neighboring family named the Bakewells. That had a significant impact on his life. First, he fell in love with one of the family's daughters, Lucy, and second, in 1807, he started working in the counting house of Benjamin Bakewell's import company. That was the start of what would become an abysmal career in business. Over the next 15 years, Audubon embarked on a series of unsuccessful ventures. His first venture, which dealt in indigo dye, lost him a small fortune. He then worked in the import business for a while, but after meeting no success, decided to try his hand at retail trade. With another young businessman, he set up shop in Louisville, Kentucky, but 6 months later the two had only minimal success. They decided to move their location to Missouri in hopes of getting more business. Audubon only lasted 6 more months in that endeavor. He sold his share in the shop to his partner and went in search of another opportunity. In 1811 he tried his hand at the import business. He and his brother-in-law established a commission house in New Orleans importing goods from England. Unfortunately, they did this on the eve of the War of 1812, and their business failed. So Audubon went back to work in trading goods. He saw some success there, but then made the poor decision to open a steam sawmill and gristmill in an area that could not support such a large operation. In 1819, the business had gone bankrupt. All through the years, two things had remained constant in Audubon's life: hunting and art. Now he had to rely on both to survive. His gun put food on the table for his small family, and he drew portraits on commission to bring in money. By default, rather than design, his hobby became his means of support. It was then, in 1820, that Audubon had what he called his great idea. He decided to create a comprehensive and complete printed collection of all American birds based on his paintings. They would be life-size and shown in their natural surroundings. For the next few years, he traveled and added more painted birds to his portfolio, while Lucy worked as a tutor and a governess in Louisiana. In 1826, when he had enough material, Audubon sailed to Liverpool, England, and immediately met with great success. It didn't take long for Audubon to get connected with engraver Robert Havell, and together they began printing the remarkable Birds of America, a series of 100 color plates in a large 29 by 39-inch format. Nothing else like it had ever been created, nor has any other book of prints since been so revered. In all, they printed about 200 copies of that first edition. Today, it's considered a masterpiece. An original, Birds of America, which sold for $1,000 in the 1820s, is now worth about $5 million. John James Audubon was unsuccessful for most of his life. It took him until he was 35 years old to figure out what his problem was: himself. He was a terrible businessman, and he didn't belong in trade. It didn't matter how many times he changed locations, partners, or business types. Not until he understood and changed himself did he have a chance at success. Evangelist D.L. Moody was once asked which people gave him the most trouble. His response was, "I've had more trouble with Dwight L. Moody than any other man alive." Television host Jack Parr echoed the same thought when he said, "Looking back, my life seems like one long obstacle race, with me as its chief obstacle." If you are continually experiencing trouble or facing obstacles, then you should check to make sure that you are not the problem. People don't like to admit that they need to change, and if they are willing to alter things about themselves, they usually focus on cosmetic changes. Why are people so hesitant to change? I believe that some, like Ottoman, believe they are supposed to pursue a particular course of action, even though it doesn't suit their gifts and talents. And when they are not working in areas of strength, they do poorly. Others are not self-aware and don't even know what their strengths are. The psychologist Sheldon Kopp says, all of the significant battles are waged within the self. To have an opportunity to reach your potential, you must know who you are and face your flaws. Allow me to help you do that. Go through the following process. First, see yourself clearly. Bishop Fulton Sheen said, most of us do not like to look inside ourselves for the same reason we don't like to open a letter that has bad news. Most people see all the bad and deny the good, or they see all the good and deny the bad. To reach your potential, you must see both. Second, admit your flaws honestly. In Chapter 5, I stated that you must take responsibility for your actions to fail forward. But you must also take responsibility for who you are as a person. That means owning up to what you cannot do, should not do, or ought not to do. Third, discover your strengths joyfully. Working on your strengths is the next step in the process. No one ever achieved his dreams working outside of his areas of gifting. To excel, do what you do well. Fourth, build on your strengths passionately. Like Audubon, you will improve only if you enthusiastically develop whatever God-given abilities you have. You can reach your potential tomorrow if you dedicate yourself to growth today. Remember, to change your world, you must first change yourself. One of the greatest stories of change that I know of personally involves someone very close to me in my organization, the Enjoy Group, and it's my assistant, Linda Eggers. If you've ever heard me speak in person, then you've probably heard me talk about Linda. I believe Linda is the finest executive assistant in the country, but I haven't always felt that way about her. A few years ago, we experienced a rocky time in our history, and the fact that we work together now is a strong testament to her willingness and ability to take a hard look at herself, make some changes in her life, and become the kind of person she desired to be. Linda first began working for me in the mid-1980s when I was leading Skyline Church in San Diego. She began working in the church's financial office. When she attended a conference of mine on leadership, Linda realized that she felt called to work full-time with me at Enjoy. She approached me after the conference and shared her thoughts with me. Later, when Enjoy was big enough, we brought her on staff. Linda immediately became an impact player for us. Under the leadership of Dick Peterson, now the COO of the Enjoy Group and president of the Enjoy Conferences and Resources. Linda did whatever was asked of her, and that was just about everything. As we grew, she took on greater and greater responsibility, and by the early 1990s, she was Dick's right hand. Then suddenly one day, Linda quit. She gave 2 weeks' notice, and she was gone. She didn't give any explanation. She just simply bailed on us. Dick and I were shocked. A few weeks later, I found out that Linda had gone to work for an accountant friend of mine as his secretary. I was amazed because she had always been passionate about the kind of work we did. Then something even more surprising happened. I started to hear that Linda was getting very negative, and she was saying critical things about me and Enjoy. And that saddened me because I always liked her. Meanwhile, life went on. Dick hired someone to replace Linda, and the company continued growing. Then about 8 months later, I got a phone call telling me Linda wanted to see me. On the day that she came to my office, I noticed that she was shaking. And as she talked, she started to cry. First, she apologized for all the negative things that she had been saying. And then she told me why she had quit and what had led to her feelings of bitterness. Dick and I talked about it, and we offered to hire her back, but it would be in a different capacity. The only thing available at the time was a position taking incoming calls and answering correspondence. It must have been difficult for Linda, who had once been Dick's second in command, but she accepted because she really wanted to work at Enjoy. And for 3 years, Linda worked hard and did everything asked of her with excellence and a positive attitude. And over time, she began to assist Dick more and more. When I left the pastorate at Skyline in 1995 to devote myself full-time to the Enjoy Group, I needed to hire a new assistant, and one of the people I considered was Linda. I knew she was highly competent. The only issue I needed to settle was whether I could trust her unconditionally. It didn't take me long to settle the issue. I knew I wanted Linda to be my assistant. If you would ask Linda today, she'd tell you that the turning point for her was the day that she looked at herself in the mirror and realized that she needed to make some changes in her life, starting with her attitude. She knows that if she hadn't, she never would have gotten the opportunity to do the work that God put her here to do. Linda continues to amaze me. I marvel at what she is capable of doing, and every time I make a positive impact on anyone with a conference or a book, she is a part of it. I wouldn't trade her for anyone else in the world. As you read this, if you're not happy with your current job, family situation, or life, look first at what you can change in yourself before trying to alter your circumstances, and recognize that not realizing what you want is a problem of knowledge. Not pursuing what you want is a problem of motivation. Not achieving what you want is a problem of persistence. If you know who you are, make the changes you must in order to learn and grow, and then give everything you've got to your dreams. You can achieve anything your heart desires. Step number 8 to failing forward. Change yourself, and your world changes. Chapter 9. Get over yourself. Everyone else has. One of the biggest changes that must be made by people who desire to fail forward is turning their attention away from themselves and toward helping others. You could call that process getting over yourself. A few years ago, I saw a wonderful movie called Mr. Holland's Opus that beautifully illustrated that whole process. The movie is the story of Glenn Holland, a young musician who desires to make it to the big time as a composer. But when money gets tight and he needs to take care of his family, he reluctantly seeks employment as a teacher. That job, which he takes only on a temporary basis, becomes his life. Through the course of the movie, he discovers that he wants to share his love for music with his students, and in the process, he discovers himself. The pivotal point of the movie comes when Mr. Holland's teaching position gets eliminated due to cutbacks, and he suddenly realizes he has reached middle age. In that moment, he knows that he has forever missed his chance to pull up roots, go to New York, and take his symphony with him, which he has been writing in his spare moments for the last 20 years. Despondent and feeling rejected, he believes he has wasted his life. He is depressed and on the verge of bitterness as he leaves his classroom. He ambles dejectedly down the hall, preparing to walk out of the school for the last time. That's when he hears something in the auditorium. When he checks to see what it is, he discovers dozens and dozens of students whose lives he changed during all his years of teaching. That group even includes the governor of the state, whose life took a major turn for the better under his mentoring. Many people believe that touching the lives of others can only be done by some elite group of specially gifted people. But that's not the case. Any ordinary person, just like Glenn Holland in the movie, can make a positive impact on the lives of others. Certain unsuccessful people tell themselves that as soon as they achieve considerable success or discover some unseen talent, they will turn their attention to making a difference in the lives of others. But I have news for them. Many people who struggle with chronic failure do so because they think of no one but themselves. They worry about what other people think of them. They scramble to make sure no one gets the better of them. They continually focus on protecting their turf. If you have a history of repeated failure and you dedicate most of your time and energy on looking out for number one, you may be someone who needs to learn a new way of thinking, where others come first. If you suspect that a selfish streak is preventing you from achieving your goals and dreams, you may need to change and improve your approach to success. First, you need to think about others rather than yourself. One of the greatest causes of negative thinking and poor mental health is self-absorption. Selfishness ultimately hurts not only the people around a self-focused person, but also the selfish person, him or herself. It inclines the person toward failure because it keeps him in a negative mental rut. That is the reason that Dr. Carl Menninger responded the way he did when someone asked, "What would you advise a person to do if he felt a nervous breakdown coming on?" Most people expected him to reply, "Consult a psychiatrist," since that was his profession. To their astonishment, manager replied, "Lock up your house, go across the railway tracks, find someone in need, and do something to help that person." My friend Kevin Myers says, "Most people are too insecure to give anything away." I believe that's true. Most people who focus all their attention on themselves do so because they feel that they're missing something in their lives, so they're trying to get it back. Developing a giving spirit, as manager implies, helps a person to overcome some of those feelings of deficiency in a positive and healthy way. If you follow sports these days, you've heard a lot of talk about the selfishness of professional athletes. The recent criticism has been especially harsh toward pro basketball players because the feeling is that too many players possess a me-first mentality. The simple truth is that when competition is fierce, selfishness will make it almost impossible for a team to win. It ultimately produces failure. If talent alone won championships, then the Los Angeles Lakers of the late 1990s would have earned one. Fortunately, all the stories out of the NBA aren't about selfishness and failure. If you look at the 1999 NBA champs, the San Antonio Spurs, you can see that their victory came because the man who had been their best player for a decade knew the importance of getting over himself. The person I'm referring to is David Robinson, the 7 feet 1 inch tall center for the Spurs. In his 10 years in the NBA, Robinson has earned just about every type of award that there is for a professional basketball player. He has also been named one of the 50 greatest players in the NBA history. Despite all of Robinson's personal achievements, the one thing he had never won was an NBA championship, until the 1999 season. How did he do it? By giving up the ball offensively and allowing another player, Tim Duncan, to be the hero. During the 1999 playoffs, teammate Avery Johnson commented, "What we have in David Robinson is the ultimate team player, the ultimate winner. He threw his ego out and became a totally different player for the good of the team." In 1999, Robinson put up the lowest averages of his career, but the result of Robinson's unselfishness was success for everyone on the team. If you want to win and overcome failure, you've got to get over yourself and begin helping others. How can you turn your focus from yourself and start adding value to others? You can do it by, number one, putting others first in your thinking. When you meet people, is your first thought about what they'll think of you or how you can make them feel more comfortable? At work, do you try to make your coworkers or employees look good? Or are you more concerned about making sure that you receive your share of credit? When you interact with family members, whose best interest do you have in mind? Your answers show where your heart is. In order to add value to others, you need to start putting others ahead of yourself in your mind and heart. If you can do it there, you will be able to put them first in your actions. Number two, finding out what others need. How can anyone add value to others if he or she doesn't know what they care about? Listen to people, ask them what matters to them, and observe them. If you can discover how people spend their time and money, you'll know what they value. And when you know people's values, you can add value to them. Number three, meeting the needs of others with excellence and generosity. The final step requires concrete action. Once you know what matters to people, do your best to meet their needs with excellence and generosity. Offer your best with no thought toward what you might receive in return. When I think of some of the great figures in history who were able to minister to people's needs and perform great service, one of the first who comes to my mind is John Wesley, the 18th century Briton who founded the Methodist movement. He was a great leader and served God unselfishly his entire life. But there's someone else in his family whom I consider to have been more selfless than he, and in fact made his achievements possible through her service. That person was John's mother, Susanna Wesley. At age 19, she married Samuel Wesley, a young clergyman who came to be regarded as one of the finest scholars of his day. They set up their household and they began their life together. Before long, Susanna bore them their first child, and then many more followed. Unfortunately, their hopes were greater than their prospects, and they spent nearly 50 years of marriage, together barely scraping by financially. In those days, middle-class women didn't work outside of the home. But Susanna had more than a full-time job nonetheless. She dedicated herself selflessly to caring for her family. She ran the household, managed the finances, and oversaw their modest farming efforts. And she did this while continuing to have numerous children. Over the course of 21 years, she gave birth to 19 children, and 10 of them survived. Despite all the work that Susanna Wesley performed for her family, the most important thing she did was educate her children. For 6 hours every day except Sunday, she dedicated herself to the moral and intellectual instruction of her 3 sons and 7 daughters. She made it the object of her life. Her acts were incredibly selfless, and in the process she had given up a lot. But the results found in her children speak for themselves. Charles was an influential clergyman and has been called one of the greatest hymn writers of all time. And John is considered by many to have shaped England more than any other person of his generation. In our current times, you may not be able to give your family the kind of time Susanna Wesley did, but that's not important. What matters is that you give all you can to the people who are important to you. And you can only do that if you learn to get over yourself. Be more concerned with what you can give rather than what you can get, because giving truly is the highest level of living. Step number 9 to failing forward. Get over yourself and start giving yourself. Chapter 10. Grasp the positive benefits of negative experiences. Working artists David Bayless and Ted Orland tell a story about an art teacher who did an experiment with his grading system for 2 groups of students. It is a parable on the benefits of failure. Here's what happened. The ceramics teacher announced on opening day that he was dividing the class into 2 groups. All those on the left side of the studio, he said, would be graded solely on the quantity of work they produced. All those on the right side solely on its quality. His procedure was simple. On the final day of class, he would bring his bathroom scales and weigh the work of the quantity group. 50 pounds of pots received an A, 40 pounds a B, and so on. And those being graded on quality, however, needed to produce only 1 pot, albeit a perfect one, to get an A. Grading time came, and a curious fact emerged. The works of the highest quality were all produced by the group being graded for quantity. It seems that while the quantity group was busily churning out piles of work and learning from their mistakes, the quality group had sat theorizing about perfection, and in the end had little more to show for their efforts than the grandiose theories of a pile of dead clay. It doesn't matter whether your objectives are in the area of art, business, ministry, sports, or relationships. The only way you can get ahead is to fail early, fail often, and fail forward. I teach leadership to thousands of people each year at numerous conferences. And one of my greatest concerns is always that some people will go home from the event and nothing will change in their lives. They enjoy the show but fail to implement any of the ideas that were presented to them. I tell people continually, we overestimate the event and we underestimate the process. Every dream that anyone has achieved came because of dedication to a process. People naturally tend toward inertia. That's why self-improvement is always a struggle. But that's also the reason that adversity lies at the heart of every success. The process of achievement comes through repeated failures and the constant struggle to climb to a higher level. Adversity and the failure that often results from it should not only be expected in the process of succeeding, they need to be viewed as an absolutely critical part of it. In fact, the benefits of adversity are many. Listen to some of the key reasons you should embrace adversity and persevere through it. Number 1, adversity creates resilience. Nothing in life breeds resilience like adversity and failure. A study in Time magazine in the mid-1980s described the incredible resilience of a group of people who had lost their jobs 3 times because of plant closings. Psychologists expected them to be discouraged, but they were surprisingly optimistic. Their adversity had actually created an advantage. Number 2, adversity develops maturity. As the world continues to change at a faster and faster rate, maturity with flexibility becomes increasingly important. Those qualities come from weathering difficulties. Harvard Business School professor John Cotter says, "I could imagine a group of executives 20 years ago discussing a candidate for a top job and saying, 'This guy had a big failure when he was 32. Everyone else would say, 'Yep, that's a bad sign.' I could imagine that same group considering a candidate today and saying, 'What worries me about this guy is that he's never failed.' The problems we face and overcome prepare our hearts for future difficulties." Number 3, adversity pushes the envelope of accepted performance. Lloyd Ogilvy says that a friend of his who was a circus performer in his youth described his experience learning to work on the trapeze. He said, "Once you know that the net below will catch you, you stop worrying about falling. You actually learn to fall successfully. What that means is you can concentrate on catching the trapeze swinging towards you and not on falling because repeated falls in the past have convinced you that the net is strong and reliable when you fall. The result of falling and being caught by the net is a mysterious confidence and daring on the trapeze. You fall less. Each fall makes you able to risk more." Number 4, adversity provides greater opportunities. I believe that eliminating problems limits our potential. Just about every successful entrepreneur I've met has numerous stories of adversity and setbacks that open doors to greater opportunity. For example, in 1978, Bernie Marcus was fired from Handy Dan, a do-it-yourself hardware retailer. That prompted Marcus to team with Arthur Blank to start their own business. In 1979, they opened their first store in Atlanta, Georgia. It was called Home Depot. Today, Home Depot has over 760 stores employing more than 150,000 people, and each year they do more than $30 billion in business. I'm sure that Bernie Marcus wasn't very happy about getting fired from his job back at Handy Dan. But if he hadn't been, who knows whether he would have achieved the success he has today. Number 5, adversity prompts innovation. Early in the 20th century, a boy whose family had immigrated from Sweden to Illinois sent 25 cents to a publisher for a book on photography. What he received instead was a book on ventriloquism. What did he do? He adapted and learned ventriloquism. His name was Edgar Birkin, and for over 40 years he entertained audiences with the help of a wooden dummy named Charlie McCarthy. If you want to succeed, you have to learn to make adjustments to the way you do things and try again. Adversity helps to develop that ability. Number 6, adversity brings unexpected benefits. The average person makes a mistake and automatically thinks that it's a failure. But some of the greatest stories of success can be found in the unexpected benefits of mistakes. For example, most people are familiar with the story of Edison and the phonograph. He discovered it while trying to invent something entirely different. But did you also know that Kellogg's cornflakes resulted when boiled wheat was left in a baking pan overnight? Or that ivory soap floats because a batch was left in the mixer too long and had a large volume of air whipped into it? Or that Scout towels were launched when a toilet paper machine put too many layers of tissues together? Number 7, adversity motivates. Years ago, when Bear Bryant was coaching the University of Alabama's football team, the Crimson Tide was ahead by only 6 points in a game with less than 2 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. Bryant sent his quarterback into the game with the instructions to play it safe and to run out the clock. In the huddle, the quarterback said, "Coach says to play it safe, but that's what they're expecting. Let's give them a surprise." And with that, he called a pass play. When the quarterback dropped back and threw the pass, the defending cornerback, who was a champion sprinter, intercepted the ball and headed toward the end zone, expecting to score a touchdown. The quarterback, who was not known as a good runner, took off after the cornerback and ran him down from behind, tackling him on the 5-yard line. It saved the game. After the clock ran out, the opposing coach approached Bear Bryant and asked, "What's this business about your quarterback not being a runner?" Bear Bryant replied, "Well, your cornerback was running for 6 points. My quarterback, he was running for his life." Nothing can motivate a person like adversity. If you can step back from the negative circumstances you face in life, you will be able to discover that there are almost always positive benefits to your negative experiences. You simply have to be willing to look for them. Bill Vaughan says, "In the game of life, it's a good idea to have a few early losses, which relieves you of the pressure of trying to maintain an undefeated season. Always measure an obstacle next to the size of the dream that you're pursuing. It's all in how you look at it. Try, and you can find the good in every bad experience." One of the most incredible stories of adversity overcome and success gained is that of Joseph of the ancient Hebrews. You may be familiar with the story. He was born the 11th of 12 sons in a wealthy Middle Eastern family whose trade was raising livestock. As a teenager, Joseph alienated his brothers. First, he was his father's favorite, even though he was nearly the youngest. Second, he used to tell his father any time his brothers weren't doing their work properly with the sheep. And third, he made the mistake of telling his older brothers that one day he would be in charge of them. At first, a group of his brothers wanted to kill him, but the eldest Reuben prevented them from doing that. So when Reuben wasn't around, the others sold him into slavery. Joseph ended up in Egypt working in the house of a captain of the guard, a man named Potiphar. Before long, Joseph was running the entire household. He was making the best of a bad situation. But then things got worse. The wife of his master tried to persuade him to sleep with her. When he refused, she accused him of making advances to her and got Potiphar to throw Joseph in prison. But again he made the best of a tough situation. Before long, the warden of the prison had put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners and all the prison's daily activities. While in prison, Joseph got a chance to meet a fellow prisoner who had been an official from Pharaoh's court, the chief cupbearer. And Joseph was able to do him a favor by interpreting a dream the man had. And when he saw that the official was grateful, Joseph made a request of him in return, that he would convince Pharaoh to let him out of prison. Joseph had great hope a few days later when the official was returned to court and the good graces of the monarch. He expected any minute to receive word that Pharaoh was setting him free. But 2 years passed before the cupbearer remembered Joseph, and he did so only because Pharaoh wanted someone to interpret one of his dreams. In the end, Joseph was able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, and because the Hebrews showed such great wisdom, the Egyptian ruler put Joseph in charge of the entire kingdom. When his brothers traveled to Egypt for relief from famine 20 years after selling him into slavery, they discovered that their brother Joseph was not only alive, but second in command of the most powerful kingdom in the world. Few people would welcome the adversity of 13 years in bondage as a slave and a prisoner, but as far as we know, Joseph never gave up hope and never lost his perspective, nor did he hold a grudge against his brothers. After their father died, he told them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." He found the positive benefits in his negative experiences, and if he can do it, so can we. Step number 10 to failing forward. Find the benefit in every bad experience. Let's review now for a moment the first 10 steps to failing forward. Number 1, realize there is only one major difference between average people and achieving people. Number 2, learn a new definition of failure. Number 3, remove the you from failure. Number 4, take action and reduce your fear. Number 5, change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. Number 6, don't let the failure from outside get inside of you. Number 7, say goodbye to yesterday. Number 8, change yourself and your world changes. Number 9, get over yourself and start giving yourself. And step number 10 to failing forward, find the benefit in every bad experience. Take a moment before you go on in the book and look at those 10 steps to failing forward. Ask yourself, or maybe somebody that's with you, how well do I do on these 10 steps? Some, I'm sure that you are already successfully failing forward. Others, maybe instead of going forward, you're failing backward. Take a moment, evaluate yourself. Work on the weak areas. Evaluate these 10 steps so that you can confidently fail forward. Chapter 11. Take a risk. There's no other way to fail forward.